Before dinosaurs ever walked the Earth, the planet belonged to stranger rulers. Long before the familiar giants of the Jurassic and Cretaceous, there was another age, a world filled with creatures that defied imagination. It was a time when continents collided to form vast supercontinents, when the air was thick with heat and poison, and when the oceans teemed with life forms that seemed born from dreams rather than reality. This is the forgotten era before the dinosaurs, the story of how the world was shaped by chaos, extinction, and the earliest sparks of survival. If you could travel back 500 million years, you would not recognize the Earth. There were no trees, no birds, and no grass. The continents were bare rock and sand, and the sky glowed orange under a thin atmosphere. Most life existed in the oceans, where an explosion of new creatures had begun to fill every possible niche. This event, known as the Cambrian explosion, marked the beginning of complex life as we know it. In the shallows of these ancient seas swam creatures unlike anything alive today. The waters shimmered with trilobites, armored arthropods that scuttled across the seafloor in endless numbers. Some were small as coins, others as large as dinner plates. Above them, strange predators like Anomalocaris glided through the water. It had a segmented body, fins that rippled like silk, and a pair of curved appendages to snatch prey. Its mouth was a ring of rotating plates lined with sharp ridges. When it struck, the trilobites had little chance of escape. Coral reefs did not yet exist, but sponges and early algae formed rough colonies that turned the seafloor into a patchwork of color. Worms burrowed through the mud, leaving trails that hardened into fossils we still find today. The oceans were Earth's first laboratories, where evolution experimented with sight, movement, and armor. It was here that the blueprint of all animal life was written: legs, jaws, eyes, and nervous systems. Every fish, every mammal, and every human would one day trace their lineage back to these alien seas. As millions of years passed, new forms emerged. The Ordovician period saw the rise of jawless fish, strange, eel-like creatures that drifted through warm, shallow waters. The continents were scattered, and most of them sat near the equator, bathed in sunlight. The seas were calm, and life flourished. But nothing lasts forever. The planet began to cool. Ice spread from the poles, and oxygen levels dropped. About 440 million years ago, Earth experienced its first mass extinction. Nearly 85% of marine species vanished. The oceans fell silent. Yet life endured. In the aftermath, new ecosystems took shape. The Silurian period brought the first signs of greenery on land. Simple plants, small mosses, and liverworts clung to damp rock. For the first time, the land was no longer lifeless. Alongside them came the pioneers of the animal kingdom. Scorpions and millipedes crawled along moist shorelines, feeding on decaying matter in each other. The world was quiet except for the hum of wind across stone, but evolution had opened a door that could never be closed. In the oceans, the first true fish appeared. With bony armor and primitive fins, they explored the reefs and hunted smaller creatures. Sharks, in their earliest forms, began to evolve, sleek and efficient even then. Coral reefs took hold, forming underwater cities filled with color and competition. The Silurian world was peaceful compared to what would follow. Then came the Devonian, often called the Age of Fish. The seas were rich and vibrant. Every shape of fin, scale, and jaw seemed to emerge at once. Some fish developed lungs and strong fins, allowing them to push through shallow waters where oxygen was scarce. One of them, a creature called Tiktaalik, made history. It was a transitional animal, part fish and part amphibian, with fins strong enough to support its weight on land. When it lifted its head above water and drew a breath of air, it marked one of the most important steps in evolution. Meanwhile, the continents were moving closer together. Massive collisions created mountains and reshaped coastlines. On land, plants began to grow taller, developing stems and leaves. Soon the first forests appeared, dominated by giant ferns and towering club mosses. Insects buzzed among them, feeding on spores and leaves. The air was thick with humidity, and rain fell in constant cycles. Life had taken root beyond the sea, and the land was awakening. But even in this age of abundance, catastrophe loomed. Oxygen levels rose so high that wildfires raged uncontrollably. Then, as climates shifted, ocean chemistry changed. Coral reefs collapsed, and entire groups of fish disappeared. The Devonian extinction claimed nearly 3/4 of all species. Once again, Earth pressed the reset button. When the Carboniferous period began, about 359 million years ago, the world was greener than ever before. Swamps and forests spread across the continents, forming dense jungles. The air was rich in oxygen, so rich that insects and amphibians grew to enormous sizes. Dragonflies with wingspans wider than a hawk's ruled the skies, while millipedes the length of cars slithered through the undergrowth. Frogs and salamander-like creatures hunted in the dark waters, and the first true reptiles began to evolve, laying eggs on land rather than in water. The Carboniferous world was both beautiful and alien. Sunlight filtered through ferns as tall as buildings, and the air shimmered with heat. The ground was soft with moss and decay, the perfect fuel for what would later become the world's coal reserves. When these forests died and were buried, their remains turned into the black gold that still powers modern civilization. But at the time, the creatures of this era had no idea they were building the future. The continents continued to move, slowly joining together into a massive supercontinent called Pangaea. Its formation changed everything. Vast deserts spread across the interior, while the outer edges remained humid and swampy. The climate became unpredictable, swinging from floods to droughts. Life had to adapt or die. By the time the Permian period arrived, around 299 million years ago, the world had transformed again. Forests thinned, reptiles diversified, and a new kind of creature began to dominate synapsids, the ancestors of mammals. One of the most famous was Dimetrodon, a four-legged predator with a large sail on its back. It hunted across dry plains, feeding on smaller reptiles and amphibians. Its sail, covered in blood vessels, may have helped it regulate temperature. Though it looked like a dinosaur, it lived nearly 50 million years before the first dinosaur existed. The Permian world was harsh. Deserts stretched for hundreds of miles, broken only by oases and temporary lakes. Dust storms swept across red plains. Yet life was everywhere: armored reptiles, tusked herbivores, and creatures with complex jaws capable of chewing. It was a world of experimentation, where evolution tested every possible design. Then came the greatest catastrophe the Earth has ever known. About 252 million years ago, volcanic eruptions in Siberia released unimaginable amounts of carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. The oceans acidified, temperatures soared, and oxygen levels plummeted. Almost everything died. Over 90% of species vanished in what scientists call the Great Dying. Forests collapsed, reefs disintegrated, and the air itself became toxic. For millions of years, the Earth was nearly silent. But even after the planet's darkest moment, life found a way back. In the barren wastelands left behind, small reptiles and early mammals began to repopulate the land. The skies cleared, temperatures stabilized, and new ecosystems slowly formed. This recovery set the stage for the rise of the dinosaurs. Imagine the world just before their arrival. The land is cracked and sun-baked, with rivers winding through valleys of red stone. Strange reptiles roam the plains, some small and nimble, others massive and horned. The first archosaurs, ancestors of dinosaurs and crocodiles, appear in the fossil record. They walk on two legs, their posture upright, their movements quick. Evolution is quietly preparing its next act. The oceans, once again, fill with life. Ammonites spiral through blue depths, and early marine reptiles glide like living submarines. Coral reefs slowly rebuild. Plants evolve new defenses against herbivores: thicker bark, bitter chemicals, faster growth. The arms race between predator and prey has begun again. The Permian survivors are giving rise to new rulers, and the age of the dinosaurs is only moments away. If you were to stand on one of those early Triassic plains, you might not think much of the small two-legged creatures darting between ferns. Yet they represent the first dinosaurs, humble and swift, the descendants of survivors who had lived through the greatest extinction in history. Their bones were light, their lungs efficient, and their blood ran warm. They would soon dominate every corner of the planet. But before their reign, the Earth had already known kings and kingdoms lost to time. The trilobites, who ruled the seas for 270 million years, were gone. The giant dragonflies and amphibians of the Carboniferous had vanished. The sail-backed predators of the Permian were dust. Every age before the dinosaurs had been both a triumph and a tragedy. Each left behind clues carved in stone, reminders that power is temporary and survival always comes at a cost. Today, when we dig into the ancient rocks, we uncover the fingerprints of those forgotten worlds. We find the ripples of Cambrian seas, the fern imprints of Carboniferous swamps, and the bones of Permian beasts. They remind us that the story of life is far older and far more complex than the age of the dinosaurs alone. The world before them was already ancient, already filled with beauty, violence, and transformation. Life before the dinosaurs was a time of experimentation, extinction, and rebirth. It was a time when the planet learned to breathe, when forests took root, when the first predators hunted in the shadows. It was a world of fire and water, of death and creation, of creatures that built the foundation for everything that followed. The dinosaurs would come later, rise to glory, and fall just as spectacularly. But they inherited a planet already shaped by the struggles of their predecessors. Without the trilobites, the armored fish, the amphibian explorers, and the sail-backed hunters, there could have been no tyrants of the Mesozoic. Across all these forgotten eras, one truth stands clear. Life never stops changing. It adapts, rebuilds, and reinvents itself after every disaster. The world before the dinosaurs may look alien to us, but it was where every story, including ours, began. Long before the thunder of the great reptiles, the Earth had already learned how to survive. It was a world unrecognizable, yet deeply connected to everything that would follow, a living planet writing its first draft of eternity.